So a couple of videos back, I was talking about how Andrew Yang went on Dave Rubin's show and they were discussing a $15 minimum wage. All right. And Andrew came out against the $15 minimum wage and I gave him flack for that. And in return, I received a lot of flack. Now, I wanted to clarify a few things in this video. Number one, I support a universal basic income. But number two, if we are not going to be in a society with a universal basic income, or we are still lacking the basic social safety net that we need as a country, we still need a raise in the minimum wage to $15 per hour. Now, what was Andrew talking about? What was his reason behind not supporting $15 minimum wage? His basic reasoning was that, number one, it would hurt workers, and number two, in a society with a universal basic income, there is no need for a $15 minimum wage. And on that second point, I completely agree. Now, a $15 minimum wage in today's society does not hurt workers. It is proven by the evidence. I can go back a couple videos. You will see exactly what I'm talking about. However, on the second point, I completely agree that, one, the universal basic income is a fantastic policy. Number two, it is the policy that we need for our economic future. And number three, if we have a universal basic income in place, many of the social safety net programs that we're talking about today will become obsolete. All right, so why do I support a universal basic income? A universal basic income would provide a floor for all of the Americans, right? So we're talking about now in a society where there basically is no floor, right? If you hit rock bottom in your life, over the course of your life, if you make some bad decisions, or if you're simply just cast a bad set of circumstances and you hit rock bottom, there is essentially no floor. Our educational system is lacking at best. Our healthcare system obviously gives you no favors. And then, of course, there's Medicare and Medicaid and all those things, but those are very limited programs. Sometimes they're hard to get onto. There's so much bureaucracy and waste and just inefficiency tied into those systems. Our social safety net is lacking at best with so many holes in it. So if you drop in America. And we are still living in a country, by the way, where extreme poverty exists in some certain pockets around the country. Extreme poverty, where they're literally living on dollars per day. All right. So with a universal basic income where everybody is receiving $1,000 per month, $12,000 per year, financed through a value added tax as proposed by Andrew Yang. If you're living in that type of economy, there is now a floor. All right. So everybody rises at the bottom, right? That as long as you are now working a job or maybe supplemented through other benefits, you are above the poverty line. It is much easier to be out of the poverty level as on the bottom rung of society. There is a floor for you, right? And that is extremely beneficial. All right. Because according to the studies, if we were able to implement something like that, the American economy would drastically increase in size. Overall prosperity would increase. Poverty would drastically decrease. And you're talking about a much more well-functioning society as a country. All right. And so according to a study from the Roosevelt Institute, if we enacted a full universal basic income of $1,000 per month, $12,000 per year, the American GDP could grow by $2.5 trillion come 2025. And the American economy would therefore increase by 12.5% to 13.1%. That's a tremendous amount of growth. All right. And according to that, it would increase the labor force size by 4.5 to 4.7 million people. It would increase the percentage of Americans with jobs by about 2%. That is a tremendous amount. Now wondering, what's the problem? Jobs grow by 2%. 4.5 million people are now employed. The economy grows by $2.5 trillion. That's 13% growth. You're talking about a bottom floor now set where the social safety net is in place. Where if you fall on your ass, if society knocks you and hits you with everything that it's got, you are still saved somewhat by the rest of society. That you are now able to pick yourself up and able to grow because society lends you a helping hand, right? So what's the problem? This seems like a perfect policy. Well, critics have argued, and again, that study is based off the premise that if we enacted a universal basic income, people would not lose their motivation to work. That is the basic assumption. That if you enacted a universal basic income, people would not just be like, all right, well, I have $12,000 now. So since that's such a mega amount of money, I'm just going to stop working. right? So it's working off of that assumption that people are going to take that money and do something beneficial with it while still keeping their jobs, but do something that will contribute to improving their lives, not just buy Jordans or something stupid like a Gucci belt or something like that, right? It's operating off of that assumption. However, critics believe that that assumption is flawed. Critics believe that if we were to enact universal basic income, people would lose their motivation. They believe that people would just give up and just say, yeah, F it. I have $12,000. I'm rich now. And that is what is so stupid. It's $12,000. That is $12,000. That's like 6 MacBooks in a year. That is nothing. That is nothing. Like, oh, you try to live off of $12,000. I want to see how long you go. That's stupid. That's so stupid. It would be one thing if it was $100,000. Obviously, most people would be like, all right, F it. Like, that's a solid amount of money. I'll just take my ass and buy a studio apartment and chill. But $12,000, that is nothing. That is well below the poverty line. That is nothing. You would obviously need to supplement that with some amount of work. So that assumption is ridiculous. And the economists that presented the study, which said it would be a tremendous amount of economic growth, they picked up on that. That the real assumption, the truth of the matter is that if you enacted a policy like Yang is proposing, people would continue to work. In fact, they would be more motivated to work and then give back to the same economy, right? Go out and purchase more things. They wouldn't have to worry about certain things. Everything would fall into place, right? So because of that and more, I support a universal basic income, right? And again, I want to attack this assumption that simply because you get a certain amount of money free of charge, you're just going to lose your motivation to work. That's ridiculous. And in fact, that is backed up by more evidence. So Finland did a trial run of a universal basic income. So what they did was they gave 2,000 people who were already unemployed between the ages of 25 to 58, they gave them a smaller amount of monthly payment, about 600 and some change US dollars, 560 euros. All right, so they gave them that amount of money and they gave it to them for 2 years. Unemployment did not increase. In fact, many people found work. They reported that they were now way more comfortable with their economic situation, and overall happiness, mental health increased. It was a tremendous success. So, again, I want to reiterate this. The universal basic income is a great piece of policy, and it is what we need to move towards if we're going to have an economic future as a country. But, this is the kicker, all right? We are in a time where large portions of Americans believe that angels are real and demons exist. We are now in a time in history where many Americans are just not with the curve on a lot of things. All right, they cannot see the future. We are now in a country where Trump is our president for some damn reason. You can chalk it up to whatever reason you want to do. The point is, we have made some stupid decisions. Some of us are not all the way there. All right, that's just the way it is. All right, and we have to now adjust to that politically. We have just gotten to the point where 70% of people can say, I support Medicare for all. We have just gotten to the point where the majority of people can say, we should have tuition-free public college. We've just gotten to the point where nearly half of Americans say socialism could be a good thing. We have just gotten to this point. And now we want to transition to the incredible point where we can say we should give a universal basic income, that nobody should live in poverty, that we should have a bottom floor for the rest of society, that your tax dollars, Steve, who drives a truck and barely survives, who cannot stand poor black people, yes, Steve, you should spend your money for the crack addict living in fucking Chicago. That's a great idea, Steve. That's a leap. That's a leap. And that is why I do not support a universal basic income right now. That is not going to play well politically. Now, you're going to say, Drake, people say that all the time about Bernie's policies. Why can't you simply apply that to a universal basic income? Because right now we are now, according to the latest polls, that 57% of people do not support a universal basic income. That is a political mountain to climb. It is not something that you want to run on in a general election. And it is different when you're talking about progressive policies that are more mainstream, that would still be quite effective in achieving the goal of the universal basic income. Right? You're talking about 70% of support for Medicare for all. You're talking about a vast majority of support for raising the minimum wage. You're talking about tremendous support for the policies that we've already worked so hard for the past decades to get into the American people's favor. All right. So now to simply uproot it with a universal basic income that a vast majority of people do not support, that is politically stupid. And again, I completely agree that in the next few years and in the coming decades, this is a necessity. And 57% is workable, but it's not workable for this election cycle or probably even 2022. But in 2024 and onward, it is completely workable, right? So it is the job of people like me. It's the job of people like you. It's the job of ordinary people to spread the word that this is a good policy. Refer them to this video. Refer them to this variety of studies which say that this is a tremendously beneficial policy and that people's work and people's drive and people's motivation is not going to be zapped by giving them $1,000 per month. All right. But for now, for the current purposes, we have to focus on the agenda that we have already set nationally. Medicare for all, Green New Deal, tuition-free public college, and yes, raise the minimum wage. It does not hurt labor force. It simply does not, according to multiple studies. All right. So this is what we have to. This is what we have to focus on for the now. But in the coming years, in the coming decades, yes, I completely support a universal basic income. It is the future. With automation moving at a very, very rapid pace, it is the future. However, it is not the present, and that is just my opinion on it. And I think that's backed up by the political realities of today. You know, it would be beautiful if we lived in a political vacuum, right? Where everything that we want, everything that we know would benefit society so much, if we could just snap it into existence. But it doesn't work like that. The Republican Party and this culture of greed and ultra-capitalism has done a number on people. And it is hard to simply uproot that over the course of a year. However, if you keep hammering away, if you keep dedicating yourself to the fight, eventually, maybe not in a year's time, but in 5 years' time, in 7 years' time, in 10 years' time, you see that people have moved by droves towards the correct side of the issue. And then we can finally see things like a universal basic income be put into place, which, again, is a eventual necessity for the continuation of the American economy.